Now, as I mentioned earlier, the focus of the symposium today will be on clarifying the concept of caliphate in Islam in contrast to the propaganda from extremist groups like ISIS. So, to start, who is ISIS and what do they believe? The origins of this group can be traced to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was formed in 2004 and was headed by a man named Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. It became a major force in the insurgency in Iraq and the invasion of the country after the toppling of the dictator Saddam Hussein. After al-Zarqawi's death in 2006, Al-Qaeda in Iraq morphed into the new entity, the Islamic State in Iraq, and continued to lead the insurgency. In 2010, a new leader emerged from the Islamic State in Iraq, a man named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Although the Islamic State in Iraq's operational capacity had become severely weakened after the U.S. troop surge in 2007, by 2013, al-Baghdadi managed to rebuild the Islamic State in Iraq's capabilities to the point that it was carrying out dozens of attacks in Iraq every month. The group then expanded its operations by joining the rebellion against Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. And this expansion into Syria led to al-Baghdadi's announcement in April 2013 of the establishment of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, what we know as ISIS today. By seizing large portions of northern and western Iraq and eastern Syria and displacing more than 1 million people in the region, ISIS quickly attracted worldwide attention. It also gained notoriety for using brutal tactics, including abductions, slave trafficking, and mass killings and beheadings. On June 29, 2014, al-Baghdadi declared the creation of a new caliphate and pronounced himself as the new caliph, unilaterally claiming authority over the world's 1.6 billion Muslims. Now, ISIS has been condemned by Muslims all over the world. Recently, an international group of 120 Islamic scholars issued an open letter to ISIS in which they argued that against the extremist ideology that the group promotes. And not only do the overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world denounce ISIS, it is often an overlooked fact that over 90% of ISIS's victims are in fact Muslims. Some go so far as to argue that ISIS followers are not even Muslims and have nothing to do with Islam at all. Now, although such a sentiment can be appreciated, as it is unimaginable that such atrocities can be committed in the name of religion, any religion for that matter, the response to ISIS must be more nuanced. And what I mean by that is that ISIS is indeed Islamic in the sense that they follow a very extreme understanding and interpretation of Islam. It is a perverted view of a spiritual faith seen through the lens of fundamentalists who view religion as more to do with power and control than morality and spiritual development. In fact, ISIS heavily relies on a theology to promote an apocalyptical worldview, their goal actually being to orchestrate events to fulfill their interpretation of certain prophecies related to the end times. Now, acknowledging the religious foundation of ISIS, as erroneous as it may be, is critical to defeating this menace. As is commonly understood, this battle against ISIS and the war on terror in general cannot be won on the battlefield alone. Rather, the ideology upon which these groups base their cause must be addressed, discredited, and ultimately exposed. This is what defeats their propaganda and halts their recruitment abilities. And this task, obviously, must be done by Muslims. At the core of ISIS's ideology is the establishment of a civilization that it believes to be reflective of 7th century Arabia, which includes a medieval view of political governance and the norms of war. This they perceive to be a return to pure Islam. And central to this goal of theirs is the revival of the institution of the Caliphate, which, according to them, every Muslim is duty-bound to pledge allegiance to and is in effect a prerequisite to salvation. So, what is a caliphate? What does the word caliph mean, and what does the Quran, the Holy Scripture of Islam, say about it? The word caliph is derived from the Arabic root word khalifa and literally means came after or succeeded. It signifies a successor and entails being a representative in a position of authority after another. Several derivatives of this verb are found in various verses of the Quran. Now, generally, there appear to be three categories of ways in which the term caliph has been used. The first is to refer to mankind as a whole. In chapter 2, verse 30 of the Quran, a conversation between God and the angels is relayed. It is, of course, an allegory that depicts the great status of mankind among all creation. It states, "And when thy Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a ruler, a caliph, in the earth. The angel said, Wilt thou place in it such as make mischief in it and shed blood? And we celebrate thy praise and extol thy holiness. God said, Surely I know what you know not." The verses following this exchange clarify that the lesson presented is that despite man having the capability of controlling the physical world, man's true greatness lies in its ability to master his or her internal desires, something that is not readily apparent to an observer. This reference to mankind being a caliph or a ruler, a ruling successor on earth, is indicative of the evolution of creation and mankind's exalted and distinguished position in it. The second way in which the term caliph is used in the Quran is to refer to generations of people. It signifies that groups of people who succeeded the generation before them. And in particular, it refers to the generation of people who came after those who were subject to some divine punishment due to their rejection of prophets and of divine guidance. In this manner, the Quran makes reference to the successors or the caliphs of Noah's people, and the successors or the caliphs to Ad, which was a tribe of people who rejected the prophet Hud, who was sent to them. Now, the third way in which the term caliph is used is to refer to an individual who succeeds another as a leader of a people. And it is this use of the word caliph that is most commonly known. As an example of this use found in the Quran, we see the reference to Prophet David as a caliph. It states, "O David, surely we have made thee a ruler, a caliph in the land. So judge between men justly, and follow not desire, lest it lead thee astray from the path of God." Now, being a successor to King Saul, the leader of the Israelites, one can see how the term caliph is applied to David. But the fact that David was also a prophet is significant. It reveals the connection between temporal rule and spiritual leadership. And this is made clear in another verse in the Quran, in chapter 24, verse 55. It states, God has promised to those of you who believe and do good that he will surely make thee rulers, caliphs, in the earth, and as he made those before them, rulers or caliphs, and that he will surely establish for them their religion. Here, a promise was given to the Muslim community at a time when they were small, weak, persecuted, and on the brink of extermination. The promise was that those who would continue to sincerely believe in the divine message and engage in good deeds by way of conduct would not be annihilated, but rather would see their religion firmly established on earth and ultimately prove to be a major civilizing force for mankind. The first four successors to the Prophet Muhammad, who Muslims refer to as Al-Khulafa ar-Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs, personify this type of caliphate. These four individuals, who will be the subject of the keynote address by Dr. Malik, were righteous followers of Prophet Muhammad who became leaders of the Muslim community because of their following pure Islamic precepts and their adherence to the spirit of the faith. And like David, the first four rightly guided caliphs were not simply temporal rulers, but moral leaders as well. In fact, it was because of their spiritual stature that they were accepted as being worthy of a leadership role. After them, various kingdoms and empires and dynasties would appear among Muslim communities, and they referred to themselves as caliphates. But as with the other uses of the term caliphate, the true significance of an individual caliph lies in being a successor to Prophet Muhammad, not necessarily in temporal rule, but in the spiritual sphere. The famous French diplomat and historian Alexis de Tocqueville once said of American democracy, "America is great because she is good. If America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great." The same rationale applies to the concept of an Islamic caliphate. A caliphate is Islamic because it is good. If a caliphate ceases to be good, it will cease to be Islamic. Now, referring back to chapter 24, verse 55 of the Quran, it is promised that caliphs would be raised among the Muslim community just as caliphs were raised among those before them. This reference to those before them refers to the Israelites, and in particular to the succession of prophets in the Mosaic dispensation. So aside from the raising of the rightly guided caliphs, the first four successors to Prophet Muhammad, who would protect the Muslim community and guide it to be firmly established on earth, the promise contained in this verse further indicates the raising of saintly figures among the followers of Prophet Muhammad as his spiritual successors, just as noble prophets were raised in succession to Prophet Moses, the laws and following the laws and the guidance of the Mosaic order. So the true significance of Islamic caliphate lies in spiritual affinity to Prophet Muhammad, not simple political governance over a Muslim community. It has less to do with geographical territory on earth and more to do with garnering tranquility in hearts. A caliph is to be less concerned with controlling societies and more concerned with cultivating souls. The true significance of a caliphate is not dependent on an Islamic state, but rather on an Islamic state of being. And this understanding of the spiritual basis to an Islamic caliphate, the true successors to Prophet Muhammad, will be discussed in detail by Dr. Muhammad Ahmad this afternoon, which brings me to an end to my introduction. I thank you very much for your attention.